I have this sense, again, as a man growing up in the midst of the church, and the sense of, again, every man's battle, and this idea that every man struggles with lust, and it has a kind of despairing sense of like, this will just kind of be your life. You're going to struggle with lust, and you
got to fight really hard against it.
Right. Exactly. You're kind of an animal with an urge that you're going to have to work against. And
Hold on.
Yeah.
Say that again. You just kind of skipped past that. That kind of did something.
Ow.
Yeah, and again, Jamie, I'm so glad that you are having that physical, visceral response, because it is so dismissive and minimizing of you as a man.
Yeah.
Of all of us as men. You're an animal with an urge that you can't control. Right? Like, something in us should say, that's it?
Right.
That's what we are? No. Right? And so just recognizing, like, there is something in us as men that was made to be moved.
Welcome to 3%. We're your hosts, Jamie Haigh.
And I'm Blake Roberts.
We're two best friends, fathers, husbands, and just two guys trying to figure it out.
We're also therapists, which is probably a pretty important part.
That's true.
And we believe that at our best, people are 97% honest with themselves and others. And it's that hidden 3% of emotions, needs, desires, and behaviors that we keep to ourselves that keep us bound to shame and loneliness, from which many of our issues stem.
Each week on this podcast, we'll interview leaders in the fields of psychology, theology, arts, and athletics to explore holistic masculinity. We're not here to tell you the man you need to be, but we are here to help you explore what gets in the way of being the man you want to be.
We're going to help you develop courage and give you the tools to share your 3% in the relationships that matter most, so you can more deeply connect with yourself, God, and others. So, pull up a chair.
Let's get into it.
So let's be honest. Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the 3% podcast. We have got a really special guest with us today who we have not met in person, but he feels like a friend already. Just even
kindred
in the short
spirit.
time we've talked and have read his words from afar. So today we have Sam Jolman. He's a therapist, a trauma therapist with over 20 years of experience specializing in men's issues and sexual trauma recovery. He has written books. He's spoke to hundreds of men and women, and has been a therapist, and he has a master's in counseling from Reformed Theological Seminary, trained in the narrative-focused trauma care through the Allender Center. And Sam now lives in Colorado with his wife and 3 sons, so he's got some skin in the game to be able to write this book that he just came out with that we're going to talk about today. Him and his family enjoy the best camping spots. I mean, they're in Colorado, so how could you not? And goes to therapy. He loves fly fishing and can often be found trying to catch his breath on the floor of his local CrossFit gym.
Nice.
So Sam is a writer as well, and he just recently came out with The Sex Talk You Never Got, Reclaiming the Heart of Masculine Sexuality. And I believe that is this your first published book, or did you have another one before that?
No, this is it. This is the
So
freshman.
Come on, Sam.
Just decided to start with a
Freshman album.
nice, easy topic to start out with. And
Right.
And now you're just everywhere on every podcast talking about this book. I'm sure you're both filled with joy and maybe some exhaustion, just all of these kind of this book tour that you're on, so to speak. So we're really glad that you're here today and really grateful that you decided to join us.
Thanks for having me, Jamie and Blake. It's great to be here. And I love that people want to have this conversation on male sexuality. So I certainly have needed this conversation myself. It's why I wrote the book. And I think we're all trying to find our way with, what is the vision of good male sexuality? Can you be a good and sexual man? Can both of those coexist together? I certainly think they can. And I think that was, God's vision in Eden. So I'm pacing myself a little more these days on podcasts, but I love that people want to have this conversation. So thanks for having me on.
like I can feel myself right now just filled with excitement about, we both read your book and it felt deeply impactful to me and my own story and the things that I have learned through recovery that have that showed up in your book, and then some things that I never realized that gave language to yearnings in my heart about what healthy sexuality could look like. So I can even feel myself wanting to not pace myself and just be like, what about this and this and this? But we're just so excited. We feel really honored that you were willing to join us and talk to us about this.
Yeah. Well, and so just like we were talking about right before we hit record, you've not always been a therapist. You've not always been the guy that is now becoming known for writing one of the, I think I saw John Eldredge say that this is the most powerful book you'll ever read on masculine sexuality. So big compliment there from him. And also this reality that like you haven't always been the guy writing about masculine sexuality. So as before we get into the book and just your insights for our listeners, we'd love to hear as much as you're willing to share just a little bit of your journey and how you even got to that point.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably true at some level. Every writer writes from his pain and his passion, right? The things that have gripped his heart. At least I hope that's true, or at least that's the kind of writing for me that I find most moving, to read myself. And so, yes, first and foremost, I'm a man, and a young man. I was certainly a sense I'm writing the book that I didn't get, right? The conversation that I didn't have, the sex talk you never got. That's my story. I didn't get a sex talk. I was handed a book, and just aware of, all the struggle that played out. Obviously, parts of it involved my own participation and, in terms of struggle with pornography and journeying through that. But I will say also beginning to recognize the stories and the experiences that shaped my sexuality that were not my responsibility. And so it took then being married. I've been married, a lover to my wife for 21 years, and it took us a good 15 years, I would say, to really know how to be brave, or certainly I can say that, to know how to be brave with my own sexual desire in marriage, and how to invite my wife to something that was playful and romantic and alive and life-giving and not sort of encumbered with shame or battle or misunderstanding, or meaning like it took us a long time to really understand the parts of our story that would show up in our sex life together. And then to know once we did begin to recognize them, how do you handle those? How do you address those? And I think, I imagine this is familiar. Wow, the gift of talking to two therapists. This is cool. I imagine this is familiar to you guys, but there's often, when men come to talk to me in counseling, the one way they know to think about their sexuality is, am I behaving or not behaving? And that's certainly how I knew to hold my own sexuality, right? Is, am I sinning or not sinning with it? And I didn't know how to address the rest of the story, so to speak. And that's obviously one lens that we need to think about our sexuality within is, Jesus invited us to be aware of our lust. But beyond that, to understand the stories that play into the formation of our sexuality, the neglect, the lack of conversation, the lack of nurture, even our understanding of romance and attachment and our own bodies, all of that, right? Like I had no category for that as a young man. And also, I'm a dad. So having 3 sons and recognizing, my goodness, I want to give them something, that a conversation that lets them stay alive to their own sexuality, but also, lets them live with love and honor through it. So as my son, I have a son that's 13 now, as they were kind of coming of age and getting more curious about, asking questions, where do babies come from? And so those sorts of things, there was also like a very selfish end in writing this book, which is I want an excuse to be able to go read a lot and do research and try to form these thoughts together and carve out a path for what might a greater vision of male sexuality look like. So,
Man, that's so cool.
yeah, thanks.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how old are your other, so you said you have a 13-year-old. How old are your other boys?
Yeah, so I have a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old.
Wow.
Woohoo!
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
wow.
rowdy.
Yeah, that's
It's a fun
awesome.
time.
It's a good deal.
I have a 3-year-old son and then a
Oh,
4-month-old
cool.
daughter. So
Okay.
we're not at the rowdy stage yet, other than my 3-year-old being kind of a tornado. But it's awesome.
That's
and
great.
And even like, just to even start on what you were just touching on, which is like the desire to do this well with your sons. In reading this book, I have 3 brothers and a sister. I'm one of 5 kids. And I was hanging out with a couple of all 3 of my brothers actually this last weekend. And I had been reading your book, and so I was talking to my oldest brother about it, and he's kind of in the midst of navigating the beginnings of this conversation with his oldest son, who is just about to be 7. So we were discussing like, okay, this is rich and meaningful, and I think it gives a lot of voice to what we wish we had learned. And quite honestly, Sam, I think my dad really worked hard to break a lot of generational sin with this conversation in the first place. My dad had 2 intentional trips where we talked about sex, and then the second one we talked about purity, which is, he did the best with what he had available to him. Some of that left me a little hurting and a little like shame induced.
He didn't have
But-
Sam Jolman or
No, he didn't. Yeah, absolutely.
like you said, this
A big ministry that gave him a curriculum that he followed, and really followed in a playful way. Like, he took us on a trip to walk us through this curriculum, which when you were talking about play, I was like, that helped. I mean, if this conversation was across a table from each other, that was not going to go great.
Yeah.
And so we did this whole trip, and that's like such a far cry from, I was even talking to him about it this last weekend. We were all at my brother's house for his birthday, and so my dad was there too. And he was like, I never got the conversation. And so the immense breaking of generational sin to just even show up, not just once intentionally, but twice.
Yes.
And then, to the best of his ability, leaving an open door for communication about it.
Yep.
Huge.
Yes.
But as I approach it, and as my brother approaches it, we want to take what my dad did and kind of stand on the shoulders of that and go even further, so that it's healthy masculinity, like you're talking about, being both sexual, safe, masculine. So is there a way that this is a huge question.
Yeah.
buckle up.
In the book, you're talking a lot to adult men. And is there a way that you have created this for, like, as a path for talking to your sons about it? Is there a way that you find, as, us being therapists, but really talking to the guy who's, you're the guy for us in our minds in this topic? How do we navigate towards standing on the shoulders of our fathers to even further break generational sin and lead our kids down a path of healthy sexuality?
Yeah, great question. I am writing to men after the fact, right? So it isn't a how-to. It's not the sex talk you still should get, right? It's the sex talk you never got. But having said that, I think of the place that I felt, certainly there are themes throughout that I want to address with my sons. Like I talk about, like, instilling in them an appreciation for beauty.
Yeah.
And that early on, trying to stop at sunsets and beautiful places and beautiful moments and beautiful music and beautiful wildflowers. Those sorts of things were very intentional, like propaganda for me with my sons. Like, I want to instill in them the heart and the capacity and even the desire to be overcome by beauty, so that they show reverence for the beautiful and have that kind of aesthetic awakening or capacity for sensuality in like healthy, good ways. So like, God gave you the world for pleasure, not just for survival. So that was one, theme that I've really wanted to work with them. But, I think about the chapter on the wounded lover, where I kind of walk through 3 areas. And again, these are not, the final way of understanding your sexuality, but it was just 3 categories that help me think of my own story. And then also, I think, just developmentally, sexual formation, which would be, embodiment, attachment, and love. So your history of your embodiment. So how was your body engaged or treated as a boy? And then also, just how are you blessing your children's embodiment, right? Like, and naming it as the artwork of God, and, saying, God made such a beautiful work of art when he made you, like simple things like that. Or telling your children, you're beautiful, you're handsome, like giving those kinds of compliments would be one thing. But then also just honoring their curiosity about their body, so, with 3 boys, getting the question, Dad, what are these balls under my penis? What are they for?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like just their curiosity about their body, treating it as normal as asking, why do noses have 2 holes? Or why is my ear flexible? Or, like those just curious body questions, like giving them the proper names. So, I have clients whose parents treated penis and vagina like swear words, right? Like,
totally.
you can't say that, and talk about casting shame from the word go, right?
Yeah.
So just trying to honor your good body. It's a good thing. It's a work of art. So embodiment, but then along with embodiment is a category of play. So not just that your body is good and it's made well, but like, it was made to be animated and engage the world, so understanding embodiment was important. And I think, just as a man reflecting on like your story, how was your body treated? How was your play treated? How was your energy treated? And I feel this as a parent, like learning how to bless, you talk about your son's tornado, right? Like, how do you bless the energy and not, it's like sort of castrate it? But also like help them know how to walk with it. Like, there are times that you can't scream at the top of your lungs. There are, like, and again, I have kids that are a little older, but like, how do I teach them like your powerful voice is good, or like your power is good, it's just not made for hitting your brother, right? Like,
that's good.
Like, how do you say things like that to bless their strength, and celebrating it when they crash their bike, like, whoa, way to be brave, and things like that. I think along with that then is, again, in kind of implicit in that is just blessing their curiosity about their bodies, about how babies are made and how bodies are different for girls and boys. And along with that would then be like attachment. So, how are you teaching your children like healthy affection? I imagine you guys are familiar with Dr. Sue Johnson's work on adult attachment, EFT stuff. She describes, I quote this in the book, some research that she was familiar with that said boys are held less than girls on average as infants. So like from the start, boys get less physical affection. Right? So you think about just the body craving for touch that men are set up to need more than girls, we could say, because they're held less, right? That neglect right there. She says, when my adult clients come in and have marriage struggles and the wife says he just wants sex all the time, she says, and again, with some compassion, I would too, if it's the only place I was allowed to get touch other than the football field. And
Wow.
and again, she's not saying that it's, she's not just blessing male entitlement, to get whatever he wants, but she's inviting compassion for men that, like, even from a physical attachment perspective, you were held less. On average. Obviously, I know
Right.
story to story that's different. So, your attachment story, how are you received when you want care and affection? That's sex is an attachment behavior. It's an attachment event. It creates attachment in marriage. It's one path to feeling more connected. It's not the only path. And then the third category is just, your understanding of romance and love, meaning like, what was it like to be around your parents' marriage? You lived as an audience member to an ongoing romance implicitly. Wow. So that will set a tone for romance for you. Did your parents display affection openly? Did they have passion for each other? Was it a covert war? Or was it cold and icy? Or did all of their passion pour into their children and not each other? Right? Like, so just getting a sense of, like, if it was a rom-com, what would be the plot of your parents' marriage? What would you describe it as? Right? What was or maybe it wasn't, maybe there wasn't comedy.
Man.
Yeah. I've never thought about it that way.
Just, as a parent then, being aware of, like, my 10-year-old son, just yesterday, my wife and I kissed, and he's like, ew, that's so sus, which is like, the buzzword at his school right now.
He doesn't even know what it means. He just hears other kids say it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah. But, like, he's a little bit like rolling his eyes at it, right? Like, mom and dad, but
How do y'all respond to that in that moment?
playfully, like, I think we just laughed, chuckled that time.
Yeah,
But, like, we
sure.
play it or tickle him, or sometimes what we'll do is pull him in to the hug,
Oh, nice.
right? Like, come here, buddy, like you get in on the affection, right? Like,
Yeah.
in a healthy sense, like, but I think being able to show my boys, like, I am in love with my wife. We're not just married, and as I say in the book, sex, the proper setting for sex is romance. Now, again, I believe romance in marriage, but I don't just say marriage, because marriage and romance often aren't equated, sadly, right?
Yeah.
That it's not just the duty of staying together, although that's a thing, right? That you find your way through fights. Well, how do you show to your children that you repair? So anyway, I know I'm going long on your
No, this is
No,
good.
this is what we wanted.
question. Okay. But that, and then as well, just obviously your own first loves and your own, at puberty, suddenly sex isn't just this mysterious force. It's in you. And it's narrating. It's a part of the conversation now in your body and in your experience your felt experience of the world. So, like those early loves and, how your parents treat your dating and were you open to talking about who you had a crush on or not,
sure.
right? Maybe you wanted to keep that to yourself, and were you allowed to? I think those three categories to me stand out as just 3 waypoints into your own sexual formation.
Yeah. Yeah. How early did you start talking to your sons about this?
That's a good question.
I think for every one of them, it was around 7. Their questions.
Is there research behind that, or that's just kind of what felt natural for you as you're attuning to them and where they are and the questions that they're asking?
Gosh, that's a good question. I'm racking my brain on research on that. There may have been a few books that I read to kind of guide, to kind of be aware of that. Like, but I think 7 to 10, but
Yeah.
earlier, totally. Like, there's not like, oh my gosh, something's wrong if they ask earlier. But like, for us, we were paying most attention to the direction of their curiosity. So it would be like, Dad, what are these, balls under my penis? What are, oh, those are called testicles. And what do they do? Well, they create cells that God uses to put together with a cell from a mommy to make a baby. Okay. Right. And then it ended there.
Yeah.
Right. Well, then, of course, a couple months later, the question was, so like, how do those cells come together?
Yeah.
Right. And it was like, well, it's kind of like in the room now. And
right.
My biggest challenge would be to say, as a parent, honor your children's curiosity. Like, meet it with answers. Now, you don't have to say everything. I didn't have to give like an hour lecture about how babies are made, right? I gave a minute version, and I gave enough to kind of slake the thirst of their curiosity, so to speak, right? Like, and then at that point, my wife and I, we had a book, and it's this, I think it's called The Story of You or something like that, right? And that explains, what I appreciate about it is it describes not just the mechanics of sex, but that it's also from a husband and wife's love for each other. So it's also, speaking tipping its hat at least at the romance that's meant to be there. Obviously, that's not everyone's story, but, casting this vision, you're starting to set not just information, but a mood and a tone for your kids. So, but, and that was like a 15-minute little book. And they were like, we're good. Like after they got that information, it was like, all right. And they just wanted to run off and play. And it's like, great, cool.
Yeah.
But I think what sounds like what I love in hearing you talk about how you all navigated that is showing up and answering the questions, and the way you were talking about meeting their curiosity with not only answers, but compassion. And I would even maybe say it sounds like respect for their curiosity.
Yeah.
Creates this kind of unspoken narrative that, oh, okay, I can come back and talk to mom and dad about this again when I'm curious, as opposed to,
right.
I'm thinking of, you think of, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking of so many different client stories I've heard as we're having this conversation around how parents responded when a guy had his first breakup, and like the heartache of that, but the just dismissal of that, because it's like, oh, you're just a boy, it's just a high school relationship or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
But in the question of what are these balls under my penis, there are so many people that I could see, just without even thinking about it, would respond to that with a joke or make light of it.
Out of their own discomfort.
Like, I'm thinking for you to be able to just answer the question to them with compassion and to respect their curiosity, that takes a lot of, like, now we're getting into like, okay, this is why we have to do our own work, because if you, and this is true in any relationship, not just in parenting, but if you bring up something to me or ask me a question that makes me uncomfortable, or I have feelings that I don't know what to do with, I'm going to subconsciously, and maybe sometimes consciously, control, manipulate, change, try to fix you so that then that thing that I'm uncomfortable with goes away.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And you are nailing what I think is such a powerful underpinning to the sex talk for every parent, which is, before you say anything, you've got to address your own shame. And again, you're never going to address all your own shame before you say something. So, deal with your own shame, whatever stage you're in, even if your kids are out of the house, right? Like, addressing your own shame, your own story, so that you can be freed up to be more open and vulnerable and meet them in their curiosity. Well said. I would agree.
Because I hear parents say, I hear clients and even just, people out in the world that say, like, with technology and everything, like, this is just inevitably a conversation, and their curiosity is going to happen earlier and earlier and earlier. And there can be, I don't know if you've experienced this, even in some of your research, this fear that parents have of, it's almost like it's hard to believe that my 6-year-old is even thinking about that. And so I don't want to initiate conversation or bring it up, because then they're going to be curious, or they're going to go look up things online. And it's like, well, either, I think maybe I heard Jay Stringer say this one time, that like they're going to find out about it. They're going to learn about these things. So would you rather it be from you in the safety of your home, or from the kid on the bus that shows them a picture and they have, it's, you know, it throws off their nervous system because they have no idea what that is or what to expect, right?
Right. One piece of research that's coming to mind is there was a study on like the Dutch way of doing sex education, which is a lot more open. And I'm not saying I think they've nailed it necessarily, but like they describe the incidence of teenage pregnancy as a lot lower because there's a lot more openness to sexuality and a lot more openness to their kids becoming being sexual beings and coming sexually alive at puberty. And so there's, I think it was Peggy Orenstein, a journalist where I found that research. But I think what you're capturing well is we think that innocence is the same as naivete. Oh, am I going to like take away my kid's innocence? Like, I don't want them to know about sex yet because I want to keep, protect their innocence. And I would say innocence is not naivete. Now, again, you don't have to say everything, but innocence is a posture of the heart, right? Like Jesus describes receiving the kingdom of God like a child. He's not saying you need to be naive. He's saying it's a posture, I believe, a posture of the heart, of wonder, and awe and, playfulness. Like that to me is the spirit of innocence Jesus is describing, and gratitude. And so I would say meeting your children's curiosity with information actually protects their innocence, as you're saying, because sexuality, Emily Nagoski says, sexuality is most like curiosity in our bodies. It's not like a body drive, like oxygen. It's actually most like curiosity.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So I think even that is a blessing. If you're meeting their curiosity, you're actually blessing their sexuality. Yeah,
in the book you delineated that as like desire versus drive, right? Is that how you talked about it in the book? Yeah, so cool, so rich to think about, because it is only really spoken about even in like, what's your sex drive like? Even in some like couples intake work, like the paperwork I've seen, one of the questions is, what's your sex drive like?
Right.
And it's amazing like how far that's permeated and not discussed as like a curiosity or a desire or something innocent to your definition of it, playful, but rather like, what's the thing you have no control over that drives you to sex? What's that? How's that doing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then it sets up this idea again of like, it's innate, right? Like sexuality just runs itself. And once you know how the plumbing works, right? I think that's some of the setup that we get caught in is like, oh, it's just supposed to work and you'll figure it out. And if you have problems, then you're set up to feel a lot of shame. Right. But like the idea of a drive is like, again, it's just innate, right? It's just your drive that you were kind of born with. And obviously that's driven by so much more in terms of the relationship that you're in, your own story, right? Like the fact that it's desire is actually good news because you can actually mess with it. You can talk with it. It's, like again, oxygen, your need for oxygen, you can't really talk about it. You just need it.
Right.
So
and I'll say why that mattered and why that was such a breath of fresh air to me. We try to be as open as we can on this podcast, but I was sexually abused by a man. And so now I've been married for 9 years to my wife, and like sex has been a place of real difficulty for me, and it's morphed and changed over time. And, I've had a hard time with pornography and the control of that. And really what was such a breath of fresh air to me was like, this is a desire, this is a curiosity, this is play. Like play dramatically changed sex in my marriage. And that was something that like, it was a need I noticed in recovery. I didn't know what it would do, but then you gave language to it in your book. And I was like, listening to it at the time in my car, and I remember just going like, yes, Sam, come on. Like, just so much
cool.
excitement for my own heart, and hopefully the heart of other men, to notice like it's not always the woman in the marriage who has a difficult time with this curiosity. I was the exception to, well, not the exception. I was the man who had the issue with the curiosity, and that impacted my wife. And then like we had to learn to communicate about it and find what play meant for me and what play meant for her to, as you say in the book, reclaim some of our innocence about sexuality. And I just love that you talk about that.
Thank you, man. And thank you for sharing your story. I feel like evil has held that language, right? Of like, being played with, even in the nature of something like sexual abuse. It can feel like you were made into somebody's toy or somebody's object of manipulation. And it was intentional for me of like, I want to fight for all men, all couples, but, especially those that have suffered sexual abuse or have suffered shame around, things like playing with yourself, right? The language we use for masturbation and, past struggles with pornography use. I will share that I resonate with your felt experience. Like I came into our marriage with a story of abuse myself, and I had some superficial naming that I had done, but had not done any of the trauma or body engagement. And my wife felt that powerfully because I had to be the one that controlled affection. And so if she would come towards me playfully, like roll over in the bed, right, and cuddle up next to me, and a moment of intimate invitation, I would stiffen like a board. And in the sense as like waiting for her to leave me alone. Like, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
And again, that's not what my heart or my mind said. Like, I love her. I'm into her. Right. She's beautiful. She's amazing. But like my body held this memory of like, this isn't safe for a woman's desire to come towards me. And, or if she hugged me in the kitchen, like I would bristle and she'd be like, whoa, okay. And back away. And she felt so rejected, understandably. Of like, what's wrong with me that I can't move towards you? And I said to her, like, I don't know what's happening in me. I love you. I'm not trying to reject you, but obviously I am. Right. And that landed me in counseling and, a deeper dive. Again, another portion of the sex talk, sexual violation, and that's obviously something, a conversation, teaching your children to respect their own bodies and also like other people having respect for their bodies, right? That's another part of those body conversations. Bodies are sacred. And so that's why we wear clothes. And that's why, you don't let people touch them. But like as well to understand like, man, there are so many men that have abuse in their stories. Overt abuse and subtle forms of abuse. I would say at some level, all men, of course.
Yeah. Wow.
I think it was cool hearing you, Jamie, say how powerful what Sam put language to was for you. And it just made me think that, like, that's so, yes, your book gives practical application that's really helpful. And it names and it puts language to so many guys' experience that they don't have that language to. And in such a, like, fix it culture, or just as men, like we want to find the answer and we want to figure out what to do. I feel like we've lost kind of the respect of just the power of naming something and realizing that like our souls, our hearts want to heal. Like God wants to heal those places in us, and naming it and being aware of it goes such a long way. Like that we don't have to like go do all of these things. And so for anybody listening who hasn't already read the book, go read it, because not only is it just a good book to read and it give you some practical application for your kids if you have them to have this conversation, but it can put language to something in you that needs healing that you might not even be aware of. And so I just appreciate that. Like, you do that so well in this book. And I know we could talk for hours. I know we're running close on time today, but I'm wondering if we could start to land the plane, and even just going back to kind of the beginning of the book, you put language to this, and we talked about how impactful this was, and I think this could be really interesting for our listeners. But you talk about the difference between awe and lust and desire and arousal, and we've probably touched on that throughout this, but I'm wondering if you could just, as we start to wrap up, put some more language to that difference between awe and lust for our listeners, because I think that's a place where a lot of shame can live and keep us away from being curious about the pure desires that are beneath or behind the lust, if I could say it that way, like the awe that you mentioned. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. I have this sense, again, like as a man growing up in the midst of the church, and the sense of, again, every man's battle, and this idea that every man struggles with lust, and it has a kind of despairing sense of like, this will just kind of be your life. You're going to struggle with lust, and you
got to fight really hard against it.
Right. Exactly. You're kind of an animal with an urge that you're going to have to work against. And
Hold on. Say that again. You just kind of skipped past that. That kind of did some.
Ow.
Yeah, and again, Jamie, I'm so glad that you are having that physical, visceral response, because it is so dismissive and minimizing of you as a man.
Yeah.
Of all of us as men, you're an animal with an urge that you can't control. Right? Like, something in us should say, that's it?
Right.
That's what we are? No. Right? Just recognizing, like, there is something in us as men that was made to be moved. We are made to be moved by life. The sensuality of your body is witness to that. Your visceral experience of beauty and your visceral experience of others, right? God made humans, I believe, as the pinnacle of creation. So we bear a glory that is meant to move each other, right? Psalm 8, David says, you made us a little lower than God, right? He's waxing eloquent. What is man that you're mindful of him, the son of man that you care for him? And again, it's often translated, you made us a little lower than the heavenly beings, the angels, but it can also, another translation there is God. So like, you are made a little lower than God. That's how extravagantly he poured the glory on you. So, the idea that you wouldn't be moved by another human being, that is impossible. You are going to be moved by other human beings. And again, can that be towards lust? Yes. Can you take that towards, I'm going to check out this woman and oogle her body and create a fantasy in my head and, serve my own arousal, my own sexual release? Yes, you can do that. But you can also, I would say, move towards something that thanks God for his glory in another human being, and also allows you to experience something that's way fuller than just a two-dimensional view of people as hot, right? Like a superficial attractiveness, but like somebody's capacity, somebody's like intelligence, to see that as a facet of beauty, somebody's ability to lead or sing or dance or play or crack jokes, right? That those are all facets of glory and beauty in a person as well. So I'm inviting men into a greater maturity. What I'm saying is, if you stay in purity as your goal, you won't fully grow up. And I know that sounds scandalous, and it sounds like, I know, I'm inviting you to be moved by people. Yes. Because I think that if you're going to be moved anyway, right? So
that's inevitable.
What are you doing with that? It's not like you can shut that down or not do that without doing damage, at least. So I'm not saying just stare at all the beautiful people around you no, that probably relationally would not be appropriate. And it may not be something you are yet capable of.
Right.
Right? Like I tell the story in the book, like I had to grow into that. But one of the ways I grew into that is my wife is an artist.
Right.
And she was taking live nude drawing classes where she was sketching people that would disrobe at a local art school here in town and bringing home all these artistic renderings of people's bodies. But I noticed something was different in me when I would look at her skill, her developing skill, right? Which meant looking at these pictures, these sketches. There was something about artistic renditions that invited awe instead of lust. You know, you think of like going and seeing a Rembrandt of like Bathsheba, who's topless, right? You know, when I see that painting, I'm not, again, you could lust.
Yeah.
Right.
But it invites something deeper. What I'm inviting again is just God and infused us as humans with glory. We are going to move each other. And I think that is actually what can lead us to worship him more. That takes growing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, even for me where I'm at right now, that feels aspirational.
Yeah.
Not
Same.
like, that doesn't feel like like a today move for me, but it feels like, boy, that sounds like a much more engaging approach to healing than running away, or even like you talked about in the book, like the snapping of the wrist with the rubber band.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's such a engaging means of growth.
Well, and it's like we talk about on this show, or why we're doing 3% in general, is like that aspirational place for you is, and for anybody listening, is not, I believe, something that you arrive to and then you stay there. Like,
Right.
you may have the ability to take in something and find awe in it, and then next week you may take in something and lust, and that doesn't mean that you're any less of a man or worse of a person, but the whole idea of the 3% is like, whatever's beneath that, there's probably some goodness in. And so if you talk to somebody about it and you're honest and you're vulnerable, like we're not getting to this place where we arrive. Just like I imagine even the sex talk is not something that you have once and then you're good. It's like I think we even said it earlier, like always having a sex talk.
Right.
Like it's continual and it will be. And the more we can be honest and vulnerable in those places, I think the more we can have those aspirational moments, because we don't have this posture of like, oh, I got here and now I need to stay. So then if I'm not there next time, then now I have all this shame. It's like, no.
Right. Exactly. Yes. And I would say, you know, just even recently, I've had conversations with my wife about somebody that I need to check in with my own heart about the awe I'm having for this person. And was aware, like, because awe will take you to your core needs. The research on awe involves two things: vastness, meaning something that's other, the otherness of the thing in front of you, and the need for accommodation, meaning actually will disrupt you and require some need to grow to be able to take it in and integrate it into who you are. So it's not, when you talk about like, oh man, it causes me to, you know, that's like a growth place. I would say it probably will always feel like a growth place at some level. And there's always a need to check in on your heart, because awe can lead you to your core needs. I'm thinking of like I saw a beautiful woman. I was pumping gas, and like island over was a woman pumping gas, and she was beautiful. And I, again, smoking what I sell, checked in with myself. What is her beauty moving in me? You know, what's the impact? What is it drawing me into and feeling? Like checking in with my own heart. And like, am I lusting? What am I experiencing? And I remember thinking like, her beauty moved me. The core need that I connected with was, gosh, I feel so tired.
Oh, wow.
In my own body. Like it helped me to connect to like core need, like a place where I was, right?
Yeah.
And so I will say like that, again, that accommodation is, it will take you into your body and require you to sit with your own capacity in the moment.
So good.
That's so good, Sam.
Man, well, I am moved
Yeah.
by this conversation.
Yeah,
moved
absolutely.
By your presence and your voice. I'm glad that we stumbled upon you and that we were able to have this conversation. And I know that we could keep going and we could sit here and talk for hours.
Right. Want to.
Want to, yeah. Part of me definitely does. But just, so grateful for the work that you're doing and the groundwork. Like, I really do. Like, this is work that will, like you said, Jamie, earlier, help change generational sin for people.
Yeah.
And
So courageous, Sam.
yeah, very. I mean, whatever book you write next, it will be like a walk in the park. I would imagine. Maybe.
I would like that. It was a hefty thing to
I'm sure.
swing for the fences on
I'm
a
sure.
book on sex. I was like,
Yeah.
oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there any, most of the people listening to this are going to be men, some of whom are husbands, fathers, or not, just friends and sons, brothers. Is there any last thing that you would want to say, piece of encouragement to those listening to you today?
Yeah, well, first of all, Jamie and Blake, I want to thank you for this conversation too. Like the deep calls to deep, the echo back from you guys is, I want to hear you talk as well. So I'm gleaning
You
from.
have to listen to the other episodes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Indeed, I will. I'm just grateful. So thank you for letting this just be a gathering of us as men. I feel that. So thanks for showing up with your hearts. And man, maybe what I would want to say to men is, your innocence, your sexual innocence is never fully gone. It is not lost. It is not hopeless. So whatever you feel has been your story, whatever you have done or seen or experienced sexually, whatever you feel stuck in, whatever you feel has been so chronic you feel hopeless, or feel so buried and so deadly, like you plan to take it to the grave. I just want to say there is always hope of recovering your sexual innocence. And I want to invite you to take up Jesus' offer of kindness to you, to be more curious about your own story and engage his offer of kindness to be free of shame.
Beautiful.
Love that.
Yeah, I asked you to share some encouragement, not make me cry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That hit me. Yeah. That's wonderful. Sam, we're so thankful, man. I hope we get to do this again. And
I would
one
love
day
that.
I
To
have
come to Colorado.
I have visions and dreams of going out there.
I've never been, but it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
same to Tennessee. I would love to. I
Yeah.
hope our
We'll make it
paths
happen.
cross in person and would love to come back.
Agreed.
Happen.
Agreed. Thanks for being here. Keep coming back. You're worth it.
Amen.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode. Listen, we're working on some really practical resources to help you connect more deeply with yourself and others. So if you head over to our website, 3percentco.com, you can learn more about that. The link will be in the show notes. And this is the part of the show where we ask you for some help. Listen, we don't have a big fancy production team. We're recording these in my therapy office in between sessions and in the margins of our life. We just really believe in the message that much. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and rarely would I take the time to review and rate a show, just because honestly, I forgot. It wasn't until we started doing this show that I realized doing that actually really does help these platforms notice our show and get the word out. And so if any of this is impactful to you, we would love it if you took a second to leave us a review, rate us, or if you want to just do it the old-fashioned way, text this link to a friend and say, hey, let's talk about this episode. Whatever you do, make sure to follow us on whatever platform you're listening to so you never miss an episode. We're really grateful you're here, and we'll see you next week.
So let's be honest.